This video is sponsored by me. Read my books, Above Heaven and Dance of Frozen Death. Links in the description. Greetings, fellow mortals. The following contains spoilers for Better Call Saul Season 6. You have been warned. There are many great scenes that I love in Better Call Saul. I can't pick my absolute favorite, but I can pinpoint the beginning of the end. The one scene where there was no going back. Where Saul's downfall was guaranteed, where there was nothing left on Jimmy's side to prevent the rise of Walter White. Innocence was murdered that night. The final scene of Better Call Saul Season 6, Episode 7, Plan and Execution starts with Jimmy and Kim basking in their victory. Lounging with each other on the couch, they watch the 1950 film, Born Yesterday. The euphoria of their greatest scheme and their celebration is clearly spread across their faces. They are interrupted by a knock at the door. Neither of them question who it is. Despite their words, the couple does not feel threatened by Howard. They know that he will not lash out at them physically. He's too good of a person to act like that. When the door opens, a single candle flickers, signaling the air from the outside rushing into the apartment. Despite the animosity between the two sides, all three people start with respectful small talk after Howard politely enters the room. He has brought them a bottle of Macallan Scotch whiskey to celebrate their victory. Howard comments how he and Chuck always used to crack open a bottle after a major success. While mocking and insulting, Howard is also impressed by the level of planning needed for his downfall. Possibly worried that Howard might be wired, Jimmy and Kim play innocent, despite knowing exactly what he's talking about. Howard isn't even insulted that they're playing dumb. They wouldn't ruin their ingenious and immoral scheme after crossing the finish line. Howard isn't there to question how they pulled it all off. He's not a fool. He's already pieced together everything that Kim and Jimmy have done. While he can't prove it, he knows them well enough to know every single step they took to make him appear as a drug addict. Instead, his only inquiry was why they would go to such lengths to hurt him personally. He doesn't expect an answer from them, but he wants to look them in the eyes to see the truth. Was it because of his relationship with Chuck? Because of how he demoted Kim? Because he was born wealthy? Because they were jealous of him? Because all of the above? Howard is flabbergasted by the time and effort they put into hurting him.
What justification makes it okay?
As shown earlier in the season with his boxing match against Jimmy, Howard confronts his harassers transparently and patiently. He doesn't yell, he doesn't punch anything, he doesn't say anything other than outright facts and the emotions that he's feeling. All the while, Jimmy and Kim sneer at him, mocking him and dismissing his claims. Despite who the protagonists of the series are, it's clear who's in the right. It's clear who the adult in the room actually is. When confronted by the fact that they tried to burn Howard's entire life to the ground, Jimmy and Kim are dismissive. He's rich, he's charismatic, he's popular, he's untouchable in their minds. They have depersoned him. To Jimmy and Kim, Howard is just a symbol of their pain, of their grief, of the unfairness of the world. In their minds, Howard Hamlin will keep going no matter what, and Howard actually agrees with them. He knows that he can get through this because he knows his own strength and his own worth. He has reflected and has grown throughout the series. There were many directions that Howard could go at this point. There were dozens of ways to hurt Jimmy and Kim. From the start, he could have destroyed their plan if he cut corners, but that's not who he is. The reason Howard lost to Jimmy and Kim isn't because he's dumb. They hurt him because he isn't willing to play dirty. He will stick by his code until the very end. This is shown when he doesn't take the path of pointing out the obvious. To hurt him, Jimmy and Kim stole money from the elderly. They ruined a settlement which cost the Sandpiper victims the finances they deserved. While the elderly will receive payment, Howard was proven right that they could get more, that they could hurt the bad guys, that they could make companies think twice before doing something like this ever again. Instead of directing the conversation towards money, theoreticals, and outside parties, Howard keeps it personal and direct. He opens up about his life, his depression, his struggles, his marriage issues. Howard reminds them that he is a person. Not only that, he's a person that has overcome the downfalls in his life. Finally, he addresses the duo directly. He points out how far they have fallen, and that he actually pities the choices that they have made to get to this point in their lives. Their reactions are swift. They try to insist that Howard is too drunk for this conversation, but it was all a defense mechanism. They weren't capable of hearing Howard tell them how terrible they had become. They aren't capable of handling the truth. And that's when Howard realizes yet another reason they targeted him. They did it for fun, for sick pleasure, because they are addicted to schemes and hurting people. Throughout the entire scene, Howard is yet to say anything incorrect. He doesn't lie. Instead, he realizes that the people in front of him are villains. He sees that they will hurt people again. And, as a lawyer with an actual conscience, Howard is determined to stop them and show the world the truth. In any other circumstance, this would be Howard's call to adventure, the moment when he rises to the position of hero to punish people who have done unforgivable things. But this is Better Call Saul. This isn't where Howard becomes the hero. This is where he becomes the victim.
Believe it. You can't hide who you really are forever.
The candle flickers again, signaling that someone has entered the apartment. As Howard declares that they can't hide who they really are forever, Jimmy and Kim flinch back in horror. Lalo has arrived. Their reaction stands in complete contrast to Howard. They knew that Howard wasn't going to do anything other than give them a lecture. Unfortunately, Jimmy and Kim have earned the ire of many different people, and their second visitor of the night won't hesitate to hurt everyone in the room. Perplexed, Howard turns to see Lalo approaching them. Emotionally drained and perhaps slightly intoxicated, he doesn't register the threat. Perhaps he thinks this is another trick. He doesn't know what limits Jimmy and Kim will go to hurt him. He ignores their pleas to leave. Instead, he addresses Lalo, saying that Lalo should find better lawyers. While aware that bad people exist, Howard has no clue that evil incarnate is standing right beside him. Lalo casually pulls out a gun. He slowly screws the silencer onto the pistol. Unlike his usual tactics of using charisma and words first, Lalo skips straight to violence. Fatigue, disgust over skulking in the sewers, impatience, a time limit, the threat of people yelling and alerting the authorities, realization that Howard was going to realize the truth as soon as he left. It all causes Lalo to skip straight to the final solution. The gun leaves everyone terrified and frozen. Unlike Jimmy and Kim, Howard has no experience with Lalo's world. He couldn't imagine a stranger killing him out of convenience. In fact, Howard might only be worried for Jimmy and Kim in that moment. When he registers the situation and starts trying to talk down the conflict, Lalo casually turns the gun towards Howard's head and pulls the trigger.
There's really no need to...
Instantly dead, Howard crumbles to the ground, his head bouncing off the table like when Chuck collapsed many seasons ago. Jimmy and Kim react in horror. Perhaps the accumulation of their actions come back to hit them all at once. Perhaps the grief of seeing a good man die is too much for them. Perhaps they're simply afraid for their own lives. No matter their motivations, Lalo hushes them. Ironically, he claims to just want to talk, despite not even bothering to give Howard the chance to plead for his life. With that, Howard Hamlin perishes. Originally the antagonist of the show, Howard grew in the eyes of the audience. He was a good man, an honorable lawyer, and the ultimate scapegoat for the entire show. Everyone treated him terribly, but he continued on no matter what. His demise signaled the beginning of the end for everyone's stories. If there was any point where Jimmy and Kim couldn't return from, it was this moment. Despite our best hopes, Better Call Saul is a tragedy, and there's no bigger tragedy in this series than a man who always tried to be better, to treat people kindly, and to live up to his responsibilities. In a way, Howard is the antithesis to every other major character in Breaking Bad. In any other story, he is the main character, but here he's just another victim. In many ways, this scene and the consequences of it represent every major theme in the Breaking Bad universe, of how evil unjustly punishes the good, that the accumulation of small choices matter, and that the truth will always come out in the end. Thankfully, Howard's reputation is redeemed by the conclusion of Better Call Saul. As Howard said, "You can't hide who you really are forever, good or bad. My only wish is that his final resting place didn't end up being next to the man who murdered him."
Jimmy, I'm sorry you're in pain.
Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this scene and suggestions of future scenes for me to cover. And if you like my takes on storytelling, please consider reading my books Above Heaven and Dance of Frozen Death, links in the description. And my third book, Vows of Blood and Honor, will be out in September. I hope that you check them all out. I appreciate you. Do not despair.